Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar with Kochava featuring Snapchat as our guests. I'm Jeff Richardson, Director of Product Marketing here at Kochava and your host / moderator for today's event. So welcome. Matt Goodrich, our very own product marketing team member, is over in the chat saying hello. Keep an eye out there for special messages and reminders as we go through the webinar. I'm going to open up with some kind of opening announcements, some housekeeping items, and we'll start that here in just a moment. Then we'll meet our speakers and we'll dive in to our agenda today, all about app growth and what actually accelerates performance here in 2026. So we've got quite a few people already on. Let's go ahead and just get rolling here because we've got a lot to cover. So again, for those of you that might have joined in the last 10 seconds, I'm Jeff Richardson, Director of Product Marketing here at Kochava. Excited to have all of you join us today for this webinar on App Growth 101 and talking about what actually accelerates performance. We've got Snapchat here as our guest. Let's start with a few quick announcements on housekeeping items, and then we're going to go ahead and meet our speakers. So number one, engage with us today. We don't have live Q&A, but we do have some polls. We have some resources that are in the Docs tab on the right side there in the upper corner of your screen. So engage with those items, engage with the polls. We love the interactivity. The webinar is going to be recorded. We often get that question. So yes, it will be made available to you on demand to consume after this live event. So we'll receive that in your inbox about 24 hours after the end of today's webinar. Again, I referenced we have some resources in the Docs tab for you to further explore some of the things we'll talk about in today's webinar. So feel free to click through on those and open those up and check them out further after the webinar is over. And then follow us online. We're on Facebook, we're on X, on LinkedIn. Connect with us, say hello, and keep an eye out for future webinars and events. So at this point, let us go ahead and meet today's speakers. So I'm going to bring Nick and Jordan up onto the stage and let them each introduce themselves. Nick, hello. And Jordan is popping up right now. Awesome. Well, let's have you introduce yourselves in the order on the slide here from left to right.
Definitely. You guys get kicked off. Yeah, super excited to be chatting with everybody today. My name is Nick Janner. I'm a senior client partner here on the Snapchat side. Been at Snap for a little over 5.5 years, largely working with a lot of our fintech apps across crypto, investing, and personal finance. So definitely hope to bring a little bit of that expertise to the table today, but also just kind of largely talk about the efforts Snap has been making to really drive new user acquisition and growth for app advertisers.
Awesome. It's good to have you. Jordan.
Hi, everybody. Jordan Shaver, Client Partnership Manager here at Kochava. In my role specifically, I work with medium to large enterprise clients, strictly focused on strategic partnership, product adoption, and measurement success within the Kochava universe, really leaning in and working parallel with our customer success team to ensure the ultimate success in your measurement and marketing goals.
Yeah, it's a lot on a daily basis, right? So awesome. Well, it's good to have both of you. And before we dive into, I want to give a quick note. We'll probably mention this a couple other times, but Snap does currently have a special offer for first-time advertisers on Snap that are Kochava clients to kind of de-risk your first test. So if you have any interest in that at any time during the webinar or anything else we're talking about, that request growth consultation button up in the upper kind of right corner of the screen, big green button with white text, you can click on that and we can follow up with you after today's event. So let's go ahead and open with a quick audience poll. I'm going to open this and you'll see a little pop-up in your lower left corner. You can go to the polls tab and you can participate and answer. So the question is, what's the biggest challenge you face in accelerating app growth? And the options are user acquisition, user retention, monetization strategies. There's a number of different options there. So take a peek at that, jump in and vote, and we can kind of see where that lands and come back to those results in a moment here and see what folks are saying here. So let me share this to screen and you'll should be able to see the results. So interesting, a nice spread so far. UA at the top there. Well, man, right at the moment we're tied, but things change live as we go. So we'll see what takes the lead here as this bakes a bit further. But Nick, Jordan, like from what you're experiencing in your daily lives in supporting advertisers and brands, what do you see? Does this match what your expectations would be?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say from the Snap side, it's pretty spot on. I was thinking the user acquisition might be one of the higher up ones. Across a lot of the fintech apps I work with, that is definitely the first thing that they're looking for is making sure they're acquiring not just new users, but also high revenue users. So definitely excited to be able to dive into a little bit of what Snap's been working on to help you achieve that goal.
Yeah, yeah. Jordan, from your day to day with the types of clients you mentioned working with, what do you typically find as one of their biggest challenges?
Yeah, user acquisition definitely is high on the list. Retention is also very high on that list. For brands who do have that loyalty base, that user acquisition and trying to get new people in does tend to be challenging. But then again, that retention and engagement with that strong user base also is high on the list, right? They want to keep their users and ensure that while they do have brand loyalty, it's how do they engage and keep them coming back for more.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, keeping the users you already have sometimes can be a lot more cost efficient than trying to constantly replace that with new growth, right? So,
yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
awesome. Well, I'll leave the poll open in the background if anybody else still joins and wants to vote in that. And we might be able to come back later and see if these figures have changed. But right now, user acquisition is in the lead with 35% of the vote. So real quick agenda for today, just so you kind of know what's ahead of us here for the rest of the webinar. We're going to talk about, kind of what actually matters in app growth. We'll talk about how to accelerate performance in practice. We will cover in a bit more detail measurement and validation of performance. And then we'll kind of wrap up with a clear low-risk test path for Snap specifically as a new partner, but I think it's something and it's a framework you can apply across any time you're looking to try and expand your media mix and add a new partner into the fray. So the first thing I want to open with is kind of talking about really the notion of measuring everything, right? You can't optimize what you can't measure. And so Jordan, kind of want to lean in on your expertise here, because this is something I think you're very familiar with. What is the importance here of measuring everything, not just paid media too? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have an ad signal out in the universe, you should be tracking that and measuring it, right? There's a inherent understanding of your users and you want to capture that at every touch point where possible. So for example, if you have a ton of email and social through your own media, you want to track that. If there are advanced channels through CTV, you want to be measuring that. Also your web journey users, right? Those are all significant touch points, whether or not that's like visible at the time. If you're not measuring it right, you may see a different story if you start to track that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if you can speak to that, when is it the moment, right, for someone to actually adopt an MMP, a mobile measurement part? Obviously mobile, that's kind of a bit of a pigeonholing because it's not mobile we do anymore. It could be CTV, it could be digital out of home. There's lots of channels beyond just mobile. And if some folks don't just have mobile apps, they have CTV streaming apps on other types of connected devices. But what is the kind of the holistic importance of choosing that moment where, okay, now is the moment I need an MMP. I can't keep growing without one.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to think of it as omni-channel here within Kochava that, most people are not just mobile anymore. So an omni-channel partner like Kochava, you would really want to bring in once you have anywhere from 2 to 3 different channels that you're measuring, specific with if you're using those large, big name publishers. They can tend to want to claim everything. And so if you don't have an effective partner helping you deduplicate and do those things, you don't have that full picture. So the earlier, the better would be the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other thing too is just, impact wise, if you're trying to make the business case, if you will, for adoption of an MMP, no need to cover all of these, but if you want to touch even on a couple of them, Jordan, in terms of what the impact is on your app growth, but also efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to think about this as like clarity optimization, and efficiency. If you don't have the clarity into your data, you're going to struggle. You also will have savings really quickly. You'll see that with your partners. And then optimization. If you are not performing on a specific channel or partner, you'll have that clarity, right? Visibility into maybe being able to move that budget elsewhere. And again, having that savings come back into play.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially too, as he's mentioned, 2 to 3 partners is kind of that moment where it's makes sense to jump in and adopt an MMP. Even if you're small budget, we have free app analytics, which is no cost for just early start. But once you have, think 5, 6, 10 media mix partners, the overlap and the need for the deduplication across those conversions is key. And that's where you'll be able to understand unique reach, maximize that, and drive maximum growth versus having you stepping on your own toes where you're hitting the same audience across many different partners. So that's kind of holistic, like omni-channel, cross-channel, the Kochava POV across thousands of different ad networks and partners that we work with. So let's zoom in now, Nick, on Snap specifically and kind of what you see working for your advertisers and the rules of app growth.
Yeah, definitely. I know, if you've been working with apps for the last couple of years, I always like to say it's a little bit of the wild, wild west out there. And definitely a lot of advancements and progress have been made across the board for many platforms. But I think that rings true, especially for Snap in the past year. But, when I'm looking at kind of the field of advertisers I work with and looking at app growth in 2026, I think it's really going to be defined by not just finding like a channel or the top performing channel, but how do you structure learning across many channels? Because really to get, once again, that user acquisition, getting new users to your app, you're going to have to be able to find a new, unique and unduplicated audience there. We know competition is higher than it's ever been, and that's increasing pressure within auction places and making it harder to find that efficiency. Under ATT and scan, performance can often look worse before it even looks better, which can be counterintuitive there, but it's definitely important to stick along for the ride. And the biggest issue I see isn't necessarily that lack of opportunity out there. It's really misinterpretation of, those new tests on new platforms. Sometimes teams can judge pretty quickly, over-index on a certain attribution window, or even, for a platform like Snap, they might think it behaves similar to Meta or TikTok. While we have a similar setup, there are nuances with our product. But winning today, really requires, I think, smarter automation, stronger signals, which you'll hear us talk a lot about, and a clear view of like what's really driving that incremental growth for your new users there. So when we think a little bit more about those 4 fundamentals of modern app growth, there's a couple key areas here. Growth teams at scale, tend to get 4 things right, in my opinion. First, like I said, is going to be that signal quality. It's going to be crucial to really making sure you have that foundation. Are you passing full event volume? Are you passing opt-in and opt-out data when available? That strong signal is going to directly impact how well the system can learn and really expedite that learning phase as well. Second, measurement, which I love. We kick this off with measurement as being key. Having that alignment across your MMP and your partners is going to be crucial. If your reporting setup isn't aligned up front, whether you're optimizing on scan, MMP, or maybe a blend across the both, or have other things like an MMM coming into play, things can get messy if you're not really looking at that apples to apples. Third, a defined learning agenda. You can't really evaluate that performance necessarily in week 1 or even on that first day. It's going to take a little bit of time to find success, but that's where you can work with, your Snap partners or on other platforms to make sure you have that right agenda for the goals that you have, that main KPI. And lastly here, creative clarity. I think that is really important for Snap. When that, value prop and that CTA is really apparent, really at second 0, as we talk about, or early on in that ad. It really is important for that to be clear early on. Long cinematic hooks don't necessarily work the best on Snap. So we want to make sure that Snapchatters really know that value that you're driving.
Yeah. And I was just thinking on the strong measurement and signal quality, and Jordan, maybe you can chime in on this, the notion of the events, the post-install events. Like it's, there's times when somebody has started an MMP and they integrate our SDK into their app, and maybe they hand it off to a developer and the only thing they implement is the install. And it's like, oh no, and then they go live and the next dev sprint's 6 months out. And it's like, but we want to optimize for purchase or registration or subscription or free trial start. So Jordan, could you speak real fast just to the importance of the full funnel measurement post-install?
Yes, one of my favorite pieces of advice or anything that I could give to somebody when they're kicking off, whether it be new or implementing new stuff while you have your dev resources, is set it up, right? There's going to be a need for a full funnel picture at some point. Speaking within Kochava realm specifically, you don't have to have it enabled right away. It'll just be there when you're ready. But understanding that full user journey and understanding the experience and where maybe you may have drop off or understanding something around that journey is going to be helpful down the road. So think big picture when you're getting started, and if it's not needed now, it ultimately will be. So take advantage while you can.
Yeah. And app event optimization is a key element of that. Like if you're measuring that event through Kochava or your MMP, any partner that supports that, you can turn on postbacks, if you will, that go to that partner and help feed them that information to optimize your campaigns in real time. And I think the final thing I add there, and I've heard some members of our team talk about this in different consults, is just this notion of, don't measure the install and then the very bottom funnel event like a purchase. That's a long drop there, and you need some of the events in between that are going to have greater volume. So think of product view, add to cart, the stepping stones to get to that ultimate North Star KPI. You need to have those in your measurement funnel as well. But no, thanks for letting us dive in a bit on that. And maybe we can proceed here to talk about the creative and measurement and acquisition a bit more, Nick.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know, highlighting those kind of different things as being, really foundational to getting off the ground running. I think it's also important to not look at those necessarily as independent levers, but how they all work together. For example, if your acquisition structure is too narrow, your delivery might suffer a little bit and not scale up as fully as possible. If your creative doesn't, clearly communicate that value early on, like I mentioned, which is important for Snapchat, then your click-through rates might drop and downstream conversion rates will follow suit. Also, if your measurement isn't aligned, like I said, then that can really lead to misdiagnosing the performance that you're seeing. I think it's really important to also see how all of those are working together to make sure that you're really hitting the ground running there and putting your best foot forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
And what do you see in terms of, and I think, Jordan, you could chime in here too, but lots of testing of new partners is something I think when somebody comes to you, right, for, hey, here's our growth, goals for next quarter, and we want to do some tests. And oftentimes they'll say, who do you recommend, right? And I know there's nuance there. As an MMP, we're kind of like, we're neutral Switzerland here. We can't really give you recommendations. We just make sure the pipes are connected so you have the data to make the discernment of what's working and what's not. But before, Nick, you jump into this, anything that you've gleaned, Jordan, from the conversations you have with clients about how they assess a new partner?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to understand, first off, your budget and then ultimately your end goals. And your end goals don't just include the marketing team, right? There likely is going to be cross collaboration from different departments. It could be product, it could be analytics, right? You're also probably going to want to loop in finance to understand what that is. But ultimately, you're going to be looking at a combination of new growth targets and also wanting to look at incremental value across channels. And so really understanding how to diversify that, you're going to want to test. So again, also knowing where that budget comes in, but also wanting to not just spread that across a few, or a lot of different partners, really chat internally, understand what everybody's goals are. And then you're going to be able to make that decision holistically as you grow into that. It's super important that there's alignment, visibility, and then just implementation.
Yeah. And Nick, what do you see as you could sell it like undervalued, right? Or making decisions too quick, trying to apply, the same strategy from one channel to another?
Yeah, no, and that's, like I said, I've been at Snap for about 5.5 years, so I've heard all the objections at this point. I'd like to think But with that, like you said, a lot of people might think, have that misconception around our audience, it just being for high schoolers or Gen Zs, or maybe you tested a couple years ago post ATT updates and it didn't quite work, or you're heavily looking at that last touch attribution. There's a lot of different things that people might not think of Snap as being able to perform there. But really, if you haven't tested Snap in the last 6 to 9 months alone, I truly, genuinely believe that it's going to be a new experience for you. And I think that kind of starts with the audience there, thinking about that misconception. So, when we talk about incremental reach on Snapchat in particular, I think some people are surprised to know that Snap reaches almost 1 billion people monthly globally. And we're looking at nearly 100 million people daily. So it's a really healthy audience. And not only is it a healthy audience, but it's a very incremental audience. Really meaning that, Snapchatters aren't on other platforms on a given day like they are on Snap. They're opening the app, on average 30 times a day. They're really looking at Snap as a close conversation with their friends there. And we see that help drive the incremental reach. So with that, the incremental reach is going to help drive those incremental conversions to help with those UA efforts as well. But once again, it's important to measure that correctly to make sure you're reaching that audience on Snap. Across verticals, like I mentioned, I work on fintech and work closely with my colleague who oversees gaming. We've seen actually really strong engagement there, especially among that 25 to 44 cohort. And we actually know that a majority of Snap's audience is over 25 at this point. So there is a healthy size and a healthy audience demo there for all sorts of advertisers, but then obviously also have that healthy penetration of younger, Gen Z users as well. So when, those campaigns are really structured and measured appropriately, we can really tap into those kind of key cohorts on the platform. And the key isn't, like I said, just reach, it's making sure that we can validate that incremental impact with really having that right measurement lens on top and utilizing partners like Kochava to see the value that Snap can drive.
Yeah. And I think it's, Jordan, you could speak to this too. I think it's common that we do see the media mixes of many of the advertisers we work with typically include, all of the ones you have listed here. There's just often that key kind of core mix that folks go to for that scale and reach. But one of the things that our Foundry team, especially, who does like custom research and incremental lift testing and some almost managed services, separate from like the notion of the MMP platform itself, is looking at that incremental reach and where in your media mix do you have heavy overlap and you're in essence stepping on your own toes, and then looking at partners that you may not have in your media mix right now that would be nearly 90+% unique new reach that you're not getting with whatever media mix you have today. So that's a really important thing that your measurement data can help show you where that overlap exists and then how to optimize that. And that can be done through audience targeting, right? Changing how you're segmenting the target audience you're trying to reach. But Jordan, anything you can share on that with the partners you've worked with and how they think about kind of the unique maximum reach?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unique to each client. I like to say that no client is the same. So it really just varies on the overall what you're seeing from your data, and the data tells the story. So it is really important to understand your data and have a clear picture with that, because like Jeff mentioned, you could be stepping on your own toes and you may not know it without having that full picture, being able to look under the hood, so to speak, and really just getting the notion of what you're doing out there in the wild, and having the visibility again is just crucial to understand that experience.
Yeah, for sure. So as we shift to talk about early signals, right? I mean, we talked about testing, and again, if you're interested in that kind of de-risked test offer that Snap is given for Kochava advertisers, first-time snappers, if you will, click that button up top, and we can follow up with you after today's event. But yeah, what do you see and point to, Nick, on your end? And then Jordan, feel free to chime in as the early signals to predict whether something's going to be successful long-term.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this is really important too, because, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier is you might not see that stellar performance on day one or week one. It might take a little bit of time to really see that revenue follow suit. And a lot of my advertisers are also tracking that revenue per user or LTV for some of them as well. And we know that's a really critical North Star for most advertisers there. But it's important to look at some of those early indicators outside of the revenue that's being driven as well, especially when you're kind of going through that initial learning phase that we'll talk a little bit later on about. So I always like to kind of look at it in pieces that kind of follow suit a little bit with a learning agenda that I typically use. But really kind of looking at that initial click-through rate is going to help tell us if the creatives and the audiences are resonating. So making sure that we're targeting the right people with the right messaging there, and really evaluating that. And then also, starting to shift into conversion rates. Are people actually not only installing, but once again, really important to have those down funnel events mapped properly, because then we can start to evaluate, are those installs actually driving meaningful actions and conversions, and actually, acquiring a new user on your behalf. And then starting to look at that, that CPR, that CAC, that can tell us whether the efficiency is trending in the right direction. And typically when these indicators do trend positively, that's a good sign that the campaigns are learning and going through that, learning phase, and that revenue is going to tend to follow suit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, just to chime in, I think the click-through rate on channel is huge, right? If you have that measurement in place, you can see specifically what channels are driving those users to engage. And that is huge, right? And it may be different on every campaign. And so having that clarity and understanding visibility again is just, it's great early in these stages.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to open a second poll here now, that's going to talk more about, what those of you in the audience have as your top app growth priorities this year. So I just opened that. Let us know. Are you looking to double your active user base, increase in-app revenue and monetization, expand to new markets or geographies, boost engagement and user retention? That's open now. Go ahead and jump in there. And that'll be as we kind of shift gears to talk about, what actually can accelerate performance across things like creative and other strategies. So let me jump and actually share this on screen here. And for those of you that are on, interesting. Okay, so we've got double active user base, and I think this is a multi-select. So this is not like, one choice fits all. So it's not necessarily the complete split of the audience, but from what you're seeing here so far, as this continues to populate, Nick, Jordan, any thoughts and how it compares to the clients that you've spoken with and what their priorities are?
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much aligns, right? If you have in-app revenue, that's always going to be a high driver. Also, active user base, again, whether it's driving new users or engaging with your current loyalty base, all of those are always top of the list. And I think, again, having the right tools in place can help you do that easily, maybe not as quickly as your senior leadership would like, but it does help to drive those goals.
Yeah, and I think too, like on the measurement side, and feel free to add to this if I miss anything, Jordan, but you can implement as part of that event funnel we talked about, obviously purchase events or subscription, whatever that revenue generating event is. You can tag specific events as a revenue event, and at that point you can pass metadata within that event. So it's not like, oh, I have 1,000 purchases, but I don't know what the revenue is, or what's the SKU they bought, or the title of the show, or what, there's all these different types of detail that you can pass in. That metadata is really helpful to start drilling down and seeing like, okay, was the product that was in the actual creative, is that what they bought? Or was it something else? If you don't implement that, then you're kind of blind. You don't want to just have the purchase event, but not attach the price or the SKU or other details. So think of that as a best practice when you implement your event measurement with your MMP. Did I miss anything there, Jordan? Is there anything else you'd add on that?
No, I think just, to reinforce, it's just get that, all of that journey, all of the metadata, like Jeff mentioned, if there's a revenue association, if there's an article read, whatever it may be down funnel that, again, senior leadership or other teams are going to want visibility into about that in-app journey, get it in there, get it in with your partner and just measure it for sure.
Yeah. And Nick, what do you think on these results?
Yeah, no, seeing a fairly even split there across the board outside of the new markets and geographies. But I think outside of my crypto, they're pretty focused on some new regions. But I think everything else definitely rings true as well. I also really like the boost engagement and user retention here. I think especially if you're a business that maybe has multiple line of businesses or different products to really bring new users into and then get them to expand within that. App or engagement audiences can be really critical for that, and making sure that you're continuing to drive that LTV throughout the user experience. So, even like working with investing advertisers, not making sure they're not making just the first time deposit, but that they're doing a reoccurring or multiple transactions or diversifying into maybe traditional investing versus crypto. So I think that can also be really, really crucial and a good use case for Snap as well.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to echo on that, actually, kind of just boost engagement and user retention. Think of if you're a QSR brand, and you have a campaign coming out that you want to drive users either to store or in app. Those things are great, right? There may be campaign specific things coming up at a quarterly or monthly that you would want to take into consideration as well on how to boost that engagement and user retention within your app.
Yep. Yeah. And doubling your active user base. I guess if you have 1 million users already, and you're trying to get that to 2 million, that's a big leap, right? So that can be a big challenge. But yeah, that's where you can talk with Snap. If that's your new partner, you can talk with your MMP, and you can figure out, okay, that's your goal. How do you get there? Because it might seem like a tall order. And I was going to say too, I think sometimes depending on your vertical, right, it can be. So in some cases, it's very easy to track in-app revenue generated events. In other cases, like with subscriptions, right, it can be a little more difficult. But we have partnerships with specific platforms that manage subscription payments and renewals, and then you can have that data still flowing. Whereas if you don't have that, it can be a bit of a technical exercise sometimes to get that recurring renewal flowing through properly, because that may not be an event that's active in the app. It might be a passive background event. So if you have a subscription-based monetization strategy and you're like, I don't know how to track that, request the growth consultation and we can help you kind of navigate that nuance. Well, thank you to the audience for participating in that poll. I will leave that open in the background, still in case anybody else wants to chime in and vote further on that. Let's go ahead now and let's jump into the kind of creative patterns that can drive early install quality. And this must be from some good data and history on your side, Nick, in terms of what's working and what's not. So can you walk us through this?
Yeah, no, definitely. I prior to joining the Snap, I was at a creative agency myself, so I actually love talking about the creative piece in particular. But I think with Snap, there's really two patterns that I've seen pretty consistent, especially for fintech, really stand out. One, I wouldn't necessarily say this is specific to Snap, but to no surprise that UGC style videos is really going to be a top performer there, especially bonus perks if you can get that to be a creator-led asset that really clearly shows the app's UI in real use. We oftentimes find that when that UI is shown in the ad, it is also typically a top performing one there. But additionally, even outside of that UGC style, when maybe a little bit surprising too, even that bold static or that single image asset with a really clear value prop, or especially if you have that promo offer, even just including that in big bold letters, that single image asset can actually typically perform pretty well alongside that. So that's why I always definitely recommend having a little bit of that creative variation and testing, especially in launching, because you might be a little bit surprised at what does perform well based on your vertical, based on maybe promos or value props that you can include in that as well. But definitely, like I kind of mentioned a little early on, sometimes those longer cinematic hooks don't perform that well. So that's where we really want to make sure the value prop is really early on there, so Snapchatters are interested from the get-go.
Yeah, and with the integration that Kochava has with Snap, Jordan, I think we get creative level detail. So as you're looking at your larger, cross-channel media mix performance data, at the Snap level, you can look at campaigns and sub campaigns, right, and creative level. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's correct.
Right, so that you can drill down to that. You can look at Snap overall, like everything Snap drove, specific campaign level, and then at that point down to creative level, and that helps you to understand what's driving it, and in addition to kind of what's in the Snap platform out of the gate, right? That helps you look at the creative level performance. So yeah, what about setups in terms of, yeah, this is a great notion, especially the targeting question, right? I mean, where do you start?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think here, one of the bigger mistakes that I can see, new testers do is over segmentation here. I always tend to say, the broader the better, especially when starting. So kind of keeping that, broader targeting and really kind of keeping those budgets consolidated is going to give that system a little bit more room to learn. And I think it's going to give you a quicker start through that learning phase, knowing that, you're going to want to start seeing that revenue and that down funnel traction start to trickle in pretty early. Setting up in this way is going to give the best opportunity for the algorithm to really learn and perform from there. So I say those two things are pretty critical, but also, allowing a little bit of time to go through that learning agenda, like I mentioned. Typically I would say our standard learning agendas are right around the 4 to 6 week mark. And with that, we'll help you tailor that specifically to your business and your setup and your optimization goals there. So we'll definitely be there to partner with you. But, once again, it's important to kind of allow it to ramp up, maybe starting optimizing towards those installs and then starting to shift down funnel into those lower funnel events as well to really make sure we're narrowing in on that North Star event for you. And with that too, I would just say, while the strategy may feel similar to what you're doing on other platforms, I think it's always important to remember too that there are, little nuances with Snap products and other platform products. So it's definitely important to work with your Snap team and your Kochava reps to make sure that you're kind of following those best practices for both platforms to really kind of find that success.
Yeah. Anything from this, especially consolidated budgets, Jordan, I think you mentioned this earlier already, but the idea of when somebody wants to go out and start testing, like choosing, like not spreading yourself too thin, giving ample budget to do a proper test, because you can't just throw, $100 and say, all right, I'm going to test you, and then you're going to fail because I only gave you $100. I mean, so any commentary on that?
Yeah, some territories get a little wishy-washy by advertiser, right? But you really want to understand what your budgets are, and you really want to give, like Nick said, give it the time to test it properly. Could be a mistake to try and see 1-2 weeks and then think that it's not performing. That just isn't indicative of that at all. You really want to understand long-term, like letting it play out, seeing how it happens. And then also if there's times within that campaign or your journey that you can optimize and try to re-engage users from that same thing that you've done and the audience that you're targeting. So really just let it flow, give it time, and then make decisions based on the data that comes out of it.
Yeah. A fully baked test, right? I always love that word baked,
Yes.
It sounds yummy because it sounds like a baked muffin, and I'm hungry right now.
Think like crock pot. You want to let it simmer for as long as possible and let it bake. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and all those signals again that you've plugged into your MMP from the get-go, right? The events in your funnel with Snap and with other partners like that can support app event optimization or just learning and optimizing off of that. All of those signals help train the algorithm, train the the optimization models, right? So that just doesn't happen in a day. It does take a bit of time, and then at that point you can start to see performance have an exponential up curve. So well, let's talk about the app power pack. Nick, I think this is something that I had heard about a little bit ago from Snap, and exciting new kind of bundle, if you will. So can you tell us about it?
Yeah, definitely. And definitely if you're interested in learning more, I believe we have this linked in the resources section too. So you can learn a little bit more about even some more products that we won't cover here. But this is where I always like to say, if you haven't tested on Snap in the last 6 to 9 months, it is really going to be a fundamentally new experience for you this time around. And that has largely been led by our app Power Pack. It's been one of the biggest performance unlocks for teams that are testing onto the platform here. And it really combines, high impact formats, our improved target cost bidding, which is basically our our automated bidding model that will optimize towards, your set CPA to really make sure we're hitting your goals for you. And then also, delivery optimization improvements on the back end there. Across advertisers, where adoption of these tools has been associated with around a 25% lift in app installs and an 18% increase in unique converters. So really actually seeing it really strongly improve performance there, and a really great thing to kind of lean in for a new test as well. One thing I'll also mention too, I know we mentioned a couple of times, but it can often be hard to get that testing budget approved for a new platform. So definitely just want to reiterate for Kochava clients that if you are looking to test on Snap, we do have an incentive that you might qualify for just to help de-risk that a little bit more, but you should be able to tap in immediately to most of this Ad Power Pack that has already been GA'd.
Yeah. And then I think we have some beautiful kind of creative examples and almost, Can you walk us through these?
Totally. Yeah. So definitely thinking a little bit more back to that kind of creative and format perspective. One of my favorite updates that we've rolled out in about the past year and a half is our sponsored snaps. And that is the ability to have ads appear directly in the chat, which is actually one of Snap's highest attention surfaces. So a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, Snapchatters are opening the app on average 30 times a day. It's because they're having those real conversations, those real chats with their friends, maybe a group chat as well. I know I still have a couple from college that are very active on a daily basis. So this format is really designed to help drive installs, as well as purchases and lower funnel events, and those key conversion events, while really reaching an incremental audience even on the platform, since we know that the chat feed is actually one of the most heavily used parts of the app itself. In fact, we've actually seen this placement drive 18% more app ad conversions. So another really impactful product update that we made as part of the App Power Pack. It's going to help reach that incremental audience on Snap. And then if we move on here real quick to the playable ads, definitely if you're a mobile gaming advertiser, this is going to be pretty crucial to your test. But this really allows Snapchatters to actually test or try out your game before they actually install. So really can help just kind of reduce that friction and improve that install quality too, to make sure that conversion rate is actually coming through there. And it can be really critical for those interactive verticals.
Yeah, and you've got also the app and as you cover this one too, and Jordan maybe can speak to this, after Nick unpacks this app end card. But we find with our different partners, super publishers, ad networks, right? There's always different placement types or different formats that they have available, and that's something that we really encourage folks to partner and talk about, especially if they're about to test or even long-term relationship. Always ask about, hey, are there new placements available? Have you released new products and formats, if you will, that we can test? Because I think this is the creativity of platforms like Snap, right? The different products that have kind of changed what people see. I mean, there's certain formats that seem so old at this point, right? Where you've seen the banner 1,000 times, you just ignore those things. So the reinvention of what things look like and how it presents itself seems to help catch eyeballs in new ways. So I'll be quiet and let you walk through this. And then Jordan, if you have anything you want to add on that point, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll quickly cover this one, but I would say this is a simple but impactful update that we have made. As you can see, it's driven on average a 19% boost in scanned installs for advertisers, but really its ability to have screenshots or examples of the UI after your ad is played. And so that also adds an additional touch point to be able to drive high intent clicks there, by actually giving a little bit more trust when you can see those reviews or when you can see the experience of the app itself. So a small but impactful update that requires no lift on the advertiser side as well.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and Jeff, just echoing what you mentioned, when you're working with partners, there's likely either dedicated team or maybe a service that you're able to reach out to and talk to them. I think it's really important to understand how their tool works so that you can effectively use it. If you're kind of going in blind, you're really only hurting yourself, right? So Kochava is no stranger to also sitting on calls with partners, with the advertiser, and understanding how we can all work together to successfully implement, channels and different areas of placements.
Yeah. And our products ops and integration teams are always kind of working in sync with Snap and other partners, because when new placements come online, there's sometimes integration updates to pass new data or pass new information. that helps so that connection is always on, and whatever the new formats are, they're usually supported and ready for measuring against your MMP data. So scan, obviously we haven't talked too much about, but in this case, scan, real quick, maybe Jordan, you could talk about scan and what that means. And then there's some best practices specifically to that on the iOS front, if you want to share that real fast, and then we'll jump into kind of measurement and validation here.
Oh, Jeff, that is the one area that I am not overly familiar with. So you caught me off my game. But I do know that our customer success team is going to be your best friend in this solution.
Yes.
So yeah, that's not my wheelhouse, unfortunately, on the technical side.
Yeah. That's I should have put a link to our scan guide in the docs tab resources. But yeah, scan, it's iOS specific. But it's scan, which stands for the Store Kit Ad Network. Bit of a mouthful. So scan's kind of that acronym. We love our acronyms in ad tech. And now it's become the ad attribution kit, which is actually the next generation of what scan used to be. But suffice to say, it's kind of Apple's privacy preserving measurement framework on iOS specifically. And you don't have to use it, but it's very helpful if you don't end up prompting for the IDFA access through the app tracking transparency framework. We have scan support with Snap specifically and lots of other partners, but there are some nuances there. And when we talk about like budget and cardinality of app groups and ad sets and things, scan, there's some almost, I would call it, they call it crowd anonymity tiers. It's these levels of like volume you have to get to before data can be unlocked on performance. So that's, if you're interested in iOS specifically and you implement scan, talk closely with the partner, Snap or other, and Kochava or your MMP on what is available specifically for scan campaigns, because it is a bit different. And it's important to understand those nuances because it impacts how you will judge performance, how fast you can judge performance, because there's delay in how quickly you receive that data. So definitely, yeah, that's as deep as I'll go on that topic because it is, we could have a whole webinar just on that. So yeah, so let's shift gears to measurement and validation. Obviously, Jordan, here, at Kochava, this is our favorite topic. You go through, obviously, no need to cover all these. In some cases, this is a recap because we talked through a lot of this already, but can you give a quick voiceover just of some quick hit best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've chatted about, you really want to have your game plan in place before you launch campaigns and have an understanding across the orgs. Event measurement is huge. Have that full journey user experience. Go into your own app and make sure you understand what the touch points are that you're looking for. Configurable attribution. It's extremely powerful within your MMP. Be sure to use it. Also, fraud prevention, utilize the tools that are available to you as well, because it is big in the industry and it is out there. So protect yourself. And also those advanced channels. Tooting Kochava's horn, we are best in class on CTV. So look for those attribution channels that are available to you. It's really important to look outside the normal scope, right? Omni channels, see everywhere, go everywhere, measure everything.
Yeah. And if you're the app marketer, but there's other teams in your org that are running linear TV campaigns or out of home or CTV, but it's a totally different team. You have no idea what the impact of those campaigns are on app performance. We can help open those windows and then those views and get answers, right? That will help your team, but also might help that team make better decisions on future campaigns and optimization. We have this kind of like quick slide on configurable attribution. Suffice to say, Jordan, I think there's a lot of different settings, and depending on the part you're running with, the channel type, whether it's heavily video based where there's not clicks or heavily click based ad units, there's many different settings that help you optimize and refine how your campaigns are measured to align with your actual goals and the types of placements or ad units that you're running those campaigns through. So this is just something like talk with Jordan or talk with your client success manager or your MMP account manager. These settings do matter, especially when you're entering a test. If you have very different settings for other super pubs and you start a test with Snap and the settings are default still, or you haven't kind of set apples to apples, it impacts the results and the outcomes you see. So this is just something to be aware of. You don't need to know what all these bullets and line items mean, but we can help you walk through that. Anything you'd add to that on configurable attribution front at all, Jordan? Or is that probably?
I'd say read your support docs too. Don't be hesitant to go into the weeds and really understand the different attribution windows and configurable settings, right? It, like Jeff mentioned, it all is important based on your partner, and they're not all one size fits all. So be sure to know how you're setting things up and make sure you're doing it accurately.
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll jump into testing here in a sec. I think just this is really kind of a quick note on this front. We do have an item in the docs tab that's available for further review on this item. But last touch attribution or multi-touch attribution is largely what we've talked about today and what an MMP is known for. But there are things like marketing mix modeling, incremental tests. There are other measurement disciplines, if you will, and depending on the size of your organization and the maturity of your marketing and your budget and the size and scope of what you're doing, at some point these are things you'll want to look into, especially as you approach other offline channels and a broader media mix. So at Kochava, we have this ability to kind of combine these three stools, the legs of the stool, if you will, together. And MMM has its strengths, last touch attribution and multi-touch have their strengths, and incremental tests have their strengths. None of them in isolation are going to get you that ultimate ground truth, but together in a unified measurement framework, they can get you there. So if it's something that you're at the right spot as an organization where you're investigating these things, click that green button up top, and we'd love to have a conversation with you and help you on that front. So let's shift gears to kind of signal quality that drives performance. And at that point, we can jump into some final stuff about a strong first test and what it actually looks like. Nick, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, definitely. I'll keep this one quick because I think we've touched on a lot of this throughout the presentation so far. But if you're not tired of hearing us say it yet, strong signals are really going to be that foundation to getting a test off the ground and really finding success there. On the Snap side, there's a few things that we've really worked on, including a lot of those updates in the app power pack that's linked in the resources. But with that, things we are in early testing for things like our unified attribution, which actually improves alignment with your MMP and takes into consideration additional settings and postbacks from your MMPs. We also, have extended our look back window to 90 days post install to really make sure that we are tracking that full value after that initial install and conversion happens downstream. We are, we talked about scan a little bit, so I'll keep this super high level, but we are fully supportive there, as well as scan 4, depending on which one you're using, but full capabilities there to really make sure that we're approaching it with a privacy safe mindset. But even then, we also have our Snap Zone advanced conversions, which is a privacy centric solution where you can actually, lean a little bit more on the MMP data passback as well as the performance you're seeing in platform. So multiple options based on how you're really evaluating performance there. But really just kind of making sure that those signals are set up from the get-go is once again going to be really key to making sure that we're driving that value and in strong ROAS for advertisers.
Yeah. And Jordan, can you comment on just being in lockstep with your partner in measurement, right? As you embark on these new tests, I guess, one thing I can think, bring us in early, right? As part of the discussion, because we'll help you set things up.
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, having that clarity early on is super important. It also is just imperatives to success to understand and not have to try to work backwards and then, take, what's the saying, take 10 steps forwards for 5 back. Just start early. I promise you won't regret it.
Yeah. And then I think we've got Nick, these 4 items on what you would expect to see in a strong test. So if you want to walk us through these, and then we had a couple questions from registration, and we might be able to kind of pick those off here in just a moment. So
Definitely. Yeah. I would say here, this is going to be a little bit more high level. Obviously, work with your Snap partners and your Kochava reps to really figure out the best solution and the best learning agenda there. But as kind of a general sense, once you have that strong signal foundation that we talked about, a few, kind of my rules, like I mentioned earlier, really starting with that broader targeting, allowing the system to learn and have the widest pool possible to find users who are most likely to convert for you. I think with that also, like I mentioned, the UGC versus single image, or maybe even you have a little bit more polished creative, really important just to have that creative variation early on in your testing, because once again, you might be a little bit surprised with what's actually resonating with Snapchatters and actually driving that strong intent click action from the ad itself. And then also allowing time for that learning agenda. Once again, 30 to 60 days, right around 4 to 6 weeks, should be a pretty ideal moment to then start really evaluating the performance you're seeing and maybe layering on then some of our more enhanced products to really fine tune and narrow in on that actual North Star metric there. But it's going to take a little bit of that time. And so hopefully with that coupon, we can help de-risk that a bit for you and really make sure that we're able to measure that performance right around that 4 to 6 week mark.
Yeah. And then common misreads.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, kind of similar to before here, don't evaluate that performance on the first day or the first week. It's not going to be, the true performance you're going to see in the long term. And once again, keeping those audiences broad, not over segmenting them, but also, making sure that you're not comparing new tests to really full mature audiences or channels for you. Because obviously if you're spending exponentially more on another channel, it's going to be hard to kind of catch up to that performance right away. But over the course of that learning agenda, we can definitely make strides and hopefully prove, just to be just as performant as another channel for you. And as we've discussed, relying on that last touch attribution can, undercount some of that actual influence there. So really making sure that we're kind of having that overall conversation alignment on the attribution window, the signal setup, the measurement piece to make sure that we are hitting the KPI that you need to.
Yeah, and Jordan, can you talk about the important, like that last bullet's so key, and the importance of looking, before you fully evaluate your test, looking at multi-touch attribution reporting?
Yeah, really getting that full picture, right? Using the tools, as I've mentioned, there's a ton of, your data tells a story, and looking at it holistically is super important. So within Kochava, we have a ton of canned reporting. There's also other tools with us, and I'm sure other MMPs have, that you are able to easily access your data, and really get that full picture, right? No, don't just look at that last touch attribution, get that full picture.
Yeah, for sure. That'll help too, if there's a lot of influence and overlap, and then there might be opportunity for updating broader, audience targeting with other partners too. And so let's cover off on a quick couple questions that we had from registrants. One of them was specifically for Snap, Nick, asking how big is Snapchat in Latin America? Do you have plans to grow in the region? Any commentary on that?
Yeah, so actually, I unfortunately don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but definitely work with your Snap rep, and they can give you the proper guidance there. But yeah, very active in Latin America with full support across our product suite to tap in there.
Awesome. Another question, and I think Jordan, you could speak to this, Nick too, came in. It's app install campaigns can be very expensive, and it's often difficult to clearly demonstrate ROI in the short term, which we were talking about. What approaches or metrics do you recommend using to better show value of acquiring app users? And probably, I would assume, maybe to their director or CMO, right? How do they go back and prove, yes, this is worth it, give me more time or give me more budget?
Yeah, I mean, I could kick us off. I think it's pretty simple, right? Like, you have to pay to acquire users, and you have to let that run. It doesn't happen overnight, but you also have to have trust in your journey, your campaigns, and trust that with time too, if you need to optimize properly, or you need to go back and maybe fix some things and retarget and do things, that's part of the journey, right? It's important to understand that it doesn't happen overnight. And I know for senior leadership and bottom lines and ROAS is they want to see it immediately, but knowing that your marketing plan is in place and trusting your partners, leaning on your partners, right? Getting advice where you can from those partners is important too. So really just you got to trust the journey and know that it's the long-term goals do back out if you give them time.
Yeah, yeah. And Nick, as you answer this, I'll put back up the results of our last poll too, just to close us out. But yeah, what do you think on that question?
Yeah, no, I think, once again, that signal strength is important. I think even as minors, just having that revenue pass back, that the algorithm will actually train better when it has the revenue figure too. So that can be really important. And I think for Snap specifically, I mentioned it, briefly as part of the app power pack, but that target cost bidding model is going to really do wonders to make sure that we are hitting your KPI and then scaling from there and not, running too far outside of it. So it'll really kind of help minimize that overall risk and have the campaigns actually average out to that goal KPI. So definitely layering that on early is going to really help accelerate that ROI for you.
Yeah. And I brought back the poll here. It looks like increase in-app revenue and monetization won with 33.33% of the vote, with boost engagement and user retention in second, and double active user base in third. Now that it's still open, so if you haven't voted yet, feel free to vote. Maybe it'll change here in these last moments. So closing thoughts as we wrap here. Nick, Jordan, anything you want to say as a parting moment?
Yeah, if I, had to leave you with one thing here, I'd really say, growth doesn't necessarily accelerate because you add more channels, like I said at the beginning, or finding that one channel. It really accelerate when you measure that influence correctly and allocate accordingly there. So making sure you're aligned with your partners, making sure everything's set up from the get-go is going to help you really get off the ground there, and give it that time. Focus on that incrementality and don't confuse the early efficiency with possible long-term durable growth. Once you get through that learning agenda, you can really kind of see where that success is going to go, and Snap could be, who knows, a top performer for you.
Yeah, for sure. And Jordan, close us out here.
Yeah, as I've mentioned a few times, data tells a story. Lean on your MMP. Kochava specifically, as in my role, I am here to support you and help you understand your data and your users and your marketing goals and strategies. So lean on your partners, understand your data, and make sure that you have ample budget and cross collaboration amongst your teams for the best success.
Oh, yes. Well, perfect. Well, thank you both of you so much. This time flew by, and I really appreciate it. So Nick, Jordan, have a great rest of your day, and thank you to everyone that joined. We'll send out the video tomorrow of the live event. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.